Once upon a time, there weren't any middle grade books, especially fairy tale middle grade books. Middle schoolers were starting to grow tired of the same old Cinderella story or Snow White. Then, one author out of many came along and helped change that. And I'm so honored to have with me that very trailblazing author, Jen Calonita. She, along with other writers, changed the course of fairy tales forever. And her fairy tale reform school, Lost Legends, and many other book series are a huge part of the new middle grade fairy tale genre. The end. Well, not just yet. In fact, she's just getting started. Greetings, book lovers everywhere. I am E-Train and welcome to E-Train Talks, and I'm beyond excited for today's interview because it's with one of my all-time favorite fantastical middle grade authors. The one and only New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of more than 30 books for teens and middle graders. The wonderful, amazing Jen Calonita. Before discovering her fairy tale themed stories, I felt like I was at a reading standstill. I'd read many amazing middle grade books, but I was just found myself wondering what's next. And that's when I found Jen's entertaining and downright amazing fairy tale reform school series. I don't have all the books with me today. Although I'm hoping to get my hands on the next books. I read them, but I borrowed them from the library. You don't need the whole backstory. Anyway, a graduate of Boston College, Jen began her career as an entertainment journalist at Teen People magazine, where she interviewed everyone from, drumroll please, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson to Reese Witherspoon to Zac Efron. It was this job that inspired her first book, Secrets of My Hollywood Life, which was the winner of the Louisiana Young Readers Award. And Jen went on to write 6 books in that best-selling series, and then she wrote several more series, including the best-selling Fairy Tale Reform School, and a book in Disney's New York Times best-selling A Twisted Tale series. And in fact, A Twisted Tales Mirror Mirror was the winner of the 2020 Teen Choice Book Awards, the only national book awards program where winners are selected by children and teens. Jen's writing also has appeared in Glamour, Marie Claire, Self, TV Guide, and Entertainment Weekly. And how can you get your hands on Jen's books? Well, I mean, you can always get them from independent bookstores. She's a part of the Renegades of Middle Grade, and she also took part with 10 other authors, just promoting independent bookstores. Okay, this is a very long-winded introduction, so I'll just end it a little bit shorter. So, without further ado, I am so honored to welcome Jen Calonita. Thank you so much for joining me.
E-Train, thank you for having me. I can't stop smiling. That was quite the introduction. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, I'm just really excited that you came because your books really just made me, I didn't know really what middle grade was, but then when I found Flunked and then Switch and then all the other Fairy Tale Reform School books, I really found that passion for middle grade. I had read maybe a couple books by James Ponti, who's amazing,
Yes.
and Percy Jackson, but I didn't really know what to do next. I wanted to expand into other genres, but I didn't know where to start. So I gotta thank my mom for finding the Fairy Tale Reform School books, because without her and without your books, I probably wouldn't be where I am today, in the loving middle grade and reading all the middle grade books that I can get my hands on.
You've made my weekend. I'm so glad your mom found the Fairy Tale Reform School series. It has been one of my favorite things to work on.
Yeah, and I just gotta say, you're quite a middle grade mastermind. And from your Tilted Tale story to Lost Legends to the Fairy Tale Reform School books, I'm just really curious to know how you come up with such amazing storylines for your fairy tale characters. For instance, in your latest Lost Legends book, which just came out, you wrote the backstory of Aladdin, filling the readers in on Aladdin's past. Do you kind of have help from people at Disney for your stories, or are your ideas simply based on what you know about your protagonist's past, a very limited amount of information from the movies and just your imagination as a whole?
You're definitely on the right track. It sometimes confuses people because the Fairy Tale Reform School series uses fairy tale characters that have existed for hundreds of years, and I put my own spin on them. I was fortunate enough when I wrote this series that I loved. My author bio mentioned I really wanted to live in Cinderella's castle at Walt Disney World because I've always been a big Disney fan. And an editor at Disney saw that and reached out and said, "You like writing fairy tales. Would you also like to work on some of our fairy tale books?" And so I was so excited. And I would say when you work with Disney, it's a little bit different because you're working on the fairy tale versions of the characters that they've created. So, for example, when you're writing about Snow White, it's the Snow White you see in the animated movie. And she's very different from lots of other Snow White versions you've seen. So you have to be true to the character that already exists. And so you do work with the team at Disney, you come up with your idea, and then it kind of goes out into the Disney universe. And they have these amazing Disney experts at Disney who know every film they've done really well and can speak to the characters and say, "I think this does sound like our Snow, and that sounds like a great extension of the story." Or, "I could see this happening to Aladdin, and this works." Or they might help you just a little bit kind of fine tune your story and say, "Well, you might not have realized this, but this is where Aladdin found Abu," or "This is what Olaf might say in this situation." So it's a wonderful collaborative process. I get to create a whole new world for some of our Disney characters.
A whole new world.
Exactly. Exactly. But it's just so much fun getting to expand their story in some way. So I really, really enjoy doing both versions. I love Fairy Tale Reform School and Gilly and her friends. And I also like working on characters like Aladdin and Flynn Rider and Anna and Elsa because I love Disney movies. So it's really fun for me.
Well, that is so interesting. Like, you have so much help from Disney. Like, just the fact that you write for Disney, that, I know that you're a huge Disney fan, so that must have been like a dream come true for you.
Oh, it was. It was. I mean, when I got that first phone call, I was like beside myself, excited, crying as if I won like an Oscar. Like, it just feels like a real honor to me to be entrusted with these characters so many people love and get to create new stories for them. So it's something I take very seriously. I feel very privileged to get to play in the sandbox with the Disney creators, and I'm always up for a new Disney adventure.
Yeah, and us readers are always up for one of your Disney adventures. And speaking of one of your latest, Lost Legends, Diamond in the Rough. It is the backstory of Aladdin. And it's just, wow. I absolutely, just positively 100,000% recommend all of your Lost Legends books. But this one really just stood out to me because I've always wondered about Aladdin's past, for instance. And knowing that you're writing exactly what I'm thinking is just, it's so nice to know that there's another Disney fan out there, like a diehard. And I'm just really curious to know, did you have, like, who exactly do you have help with? Like, for instance, with Lost Legends, do you talk with, like, the directors of some of the movies about the characters, or do you kind of have help from other sources?
It depends on the project. So the Lost Legends series, for anybody who hasn't read it yet, really focuses on some of the heroes from Disney's popular movies before they were heroes, what they were like as kids. And the first book was Flynn Rider, who fans of Disney know his name was really Eugene Fitzherbert. And it was really about him finding his way in the world with his best friend, Arnwaldo Schnitz, who also goes by Lance Strongbow. And fans of Tangled might know them both from the Tangled movie, but also Lance was in the Tangled TV series. So for Flynn, I was really fortunate because Chris Sonnenberg was the creator and executive producer of the Tangled TV series. And Disney put me in touch with him, and he was just so wonderful to me. I could text him a question and say, "Hey," because the book focuses on a lot of Flynn Rider books that Flynn reads. I would say, "Hey, did you name any of the books in the TV series? Did I miss anything?" And Chris would write me right back. Or if I said, "I'm really looking for a full map of the kingdom," Chris would send me a map. So he was wonderful. I dedicated that book to him because I couldn't have done it without him. For Aladdin, that story has existed a lot longer in the Disney universe, so it was a little bit different. For Aladdin, like Flynn's home is his best friend, it's Lance. For Aladdin, his home is really the city we know so well in the movie. And so for that one, it was definitely different because I worked with Disney and I worked with some cultural experts in the Middle East just to make sure I really got the feel for the city when he was younger, when he was 12, and also what his life would be like. And one thing I always wondered is in the movie, he's referred to as the diamond in the rough. He's the only one who can open the Cave of Wonders, and Jafar has this beetle, two halves that become whole, that open the cave with Aladdin's help. And so I said to myself, wouldn't it be kind of fun if Aladdin's parents knew he was meant to open the cave? It had been prophesized at birth, and they didn't want anything to happen to him, so they tried to hide him. And as you know from reading the book, things go wrong. So when we meet him at 12, he has half of that beetle, and Jafar's brother has come to town in search of the missing half. And fans of Aladdin would say, well, Jen, Aladdin doesn't know he's the diamond in the rough and he doesn't have the beetle in the movie. But as you know from reading the story, like something happens over the course of the book that changes all that. So it was a lot of fun to imagine what Aladdin was like as a kid, roaming the city, who he had help from. I couldn't imagine him being on his own forever. So it was nice to get to create a cast of characters to help him on his journey.
Well, I love that you added a little bit of, you added a lot of the movies, but you also just added that twist that really separates, Lost Legends from the actual films. So I think from a research standpoint, you are you're the definition of a dedicated author. You talk to so many sources, and
Thank you.
I feel like research is the scariest and most daunting task when it comes to writing a book. But it feels like you're doing it whoa, you've written so many books now that it's just another piece to the puzzle, not another super scary task.
Well, you know what it is? People always say, does it get easier with each book you write? I wouldn't say it gets easier. Each book is hard and each book is challenging in different ways. The research is different for every story. When you're working on an Aladdin or a Disney story, you definitely go back to the films. Like I watched the animated version. I watched the live action version that director Guy Ritchie did a few years ago. You watch everything you can. You try to get a feel for the voice of the characters, and then you kind of try to imagine a new world for them. So my kids find that we have Disney Plus on a lot in our house because if I'm working on a Disney project, I really want to hear Kristoff in my head or Anna or Elsa and imagine their world. But then if I'm looking at a new culture, I definitely want experts from that culture to help me along with the story as well.
So I just want to know why you decided to have books, forbidden books, as a central part of the story. And was there someone who inspired the rebellious character Gilly?
So the Fairy Tale Reform School series and Gilly really come from the fact that as a kid, my parents really didn't let us watch any TV that they thought would be upsetting or would cause nightmares, because I was that kid who was scared of scary movies. And so Disney movies were on a lot in our house. And I always liked Cinderella. But what I didn't like about Cinderella was the ending. And so one day I was talking about it with my mom, and my mom said, "What bothers you about the ending? Aren't you happy Cinderella got her happily ever after?" And I said, "No, because I'm really worried about the wicked stepmom, because I feel like the wicked stepmother is mean but not evil, because she let Cinderella stay in the house. And if she goes to fairy tale jail, there's going to be no one to take care of the wicked stepsisters. And then they're going to grow up and become villains." And I already liked to write at this point as a kid. And my mom said, "Well, this is Cinderella's story. If you want to tell the wicked stepmothers, you have to do that yourself." So it's something I thought about a lot over the years. And as we've talked about, I like Disney movies. I always liked fairy tales. As I got older, I read so many different versions of the fairy tales. But I always wondered what would happen if the wicked stepmother apologized to Cinderella and Cinderella forgave her. And I thought maybe she'd open a school for kids on the path to becoming villains who have to learn to behave. And that would be a fairy tale reform school. So I knew right away the main character could not be somebody, as you said, who was like too perfect or too good. And I thought one of the fun things about some villains is that they're very useful in certain situations and they can understand other villains in the way they think. So they might be able to stop them. And so Gilly had to be a little bit bad in a way. And so when we meet her, she's a pickpocket, but she's stealing to help her family who doesn't have enough to eat. So I felt like you could see there was this balance. Like she wasn't stealing just to steal, but she does have a real chip on her shoulder. She does not trust royals. She thinks, you know, she judges people by their background or their title in life. And so she has a lot to learn over the course of the series, along with her new friends. And I just love that journey for them. I loved getting to explore them over so many books and see how they grow and change, and how Gilly goes from this very reluctant hero to a hero. And so she really was inspired by, you know, there was a kid in my older son's class when he was in elementary school. And every time I was in the class to observe anything, if he answered a question, she would kind of like counter his point. And she just did it in this very sassy way. And I was like, oh gosh, I love her. Who is this? And the mom was like, oh, this is Gilly. And so I knew I had to name the character after this girl, because she just kind of embodied the character I was looking for. And that's how she came to be. So people always say, is it Jilly or is it Gilly? Because people pronounce it different ways. And in my mind, she's always been Gilly, like this girl in real life that I've known for several years now.
Well, I love that answer. And well, backstories are always the most interesting part of the interviews, in my opinion. And speaking of backstories, I'm sorry to keep everybody waiting for so long, but I have to ask just about, you know, how you interviewed super famous celebrities. It's time to ask about your past Hollywood life. You worked for Teen People magazine, and you were interviewing big name celebrities from Reese Witherspoon to Zac Efron to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I have so many questions. Firstly, how did you end up working as a magazine journalist? And also, when you interviewed these celebrities, did they have any words of wisdom that really inspired you and just that have stuck with you along your journey?
When I went to college and I studied writing, at that point, you know, even though as a kid I really wanted to be an author, I had tried writing a book a few times, and I really couldn't get past like 6, 8 pages. I didn't know my stories. I used to give up. I got so frustrated and I gave up. And so I thought, you like to write, but you can't write a book. And at that point, it was very different than it is now. There were a lot more magazines. And I became an assistant at a magazine, and then a job opened at this Teen People magazine, which was a teen version People magazine had for a number of years. And I became an assistant editor there. And I thought I was going to interview celebrities. For the first year I worked there, I really only opened mail. And I was more an assistant. I would get everybody coffee. I would pick up dry cleaning for photo shoots. Sometimes I'd buy celebrity baby gifts. And I just really wanted to interview celebrities, but I had to prove myself, because we don't get what we want just because we want it. We have to work for it. And so eventually I started to get to do some red carpet interviews, and then it kind of expanded from there. A lot of the celebrities I interviewed were not the big stars we know now. Dwayne Johnson, when I interviewed him, was just making his first movie. I think it was his first movie, The Scorpion King. And I had to fight to get the interview in the magazine, because I remember at meetings people would say, Jen, you want to interview a wrestler? Like, does anybody really care about the WWE? And I was like, I feel like he could be a star.
And he is.
And he is. But I think rather than them inspiring me or giving me words of wisdom, the one thing I really learned at this job was I wasn't a great reporter, because a lot of times I was interviewing kids or I was interviewing teens, and I was always much more concerned about their well-being than I was at getting a good quote. So for example, if a teen with their first TV show told me something that I didn't think they'd want in print, a lot of times I would stop my tape recorder and I'd say, do you want me to write about that? And they would say, no. And I'd say, okay, never tell a reporter anything you don't want reported. I'm going to rewind the tape and we'll start again. Because I feel like as kids and even as adults, sometimes we say things off the cuff and we don't necessarily want that out there in the world, and I just wanted to give them a second chance. So I felt bad for kids who were in the spotlight because they wanted to have this amazing job, but then there was a lot of baggage that came with it. So it really, more than anything, it inspired my first book series, Secrets of My Hollywood Life, which was about a teen girl kind of navigating Hollywood, but also wanting to keep a private life to herself, so that she could have a life outside, Hollywood. And so that was more it. I kind of took all my experiences of interviewing different teen stars or different stars along the way and tried to create this relatable movie star girl who was trying to have it all in the face of Hollywood.
That is a really fun, fascinating storyline. I need to read that series. And all of you need to read Jen's books. And special announcement, Jen Calonita actually has 2 giveaways going on right now as I speak.
So I have 2 giveaways going on right now on social media. So Mary Mancusi and I, who also writes for Disney, and she writes a lot of other great books, we have a new Frozen book that takes place after the events of Frozen 2 called Polar Nights Cast into Darkness. And it is about a zombie, which in Norse legend is called a draugr, who can control the weather and steal people's memories. It's about him invading Arendelle and Elsa and Anna trying to stop it and figure out what is going on. So it's a spooky Disney story. And we thought, since today is October 1st, when we're doing this interview, there's 31 days of Halloween, we should share some different awesome spooky stories that are also Disney stories. So if you like your spooky stories with a Disney twist, we are giving away on Twitter and Instagram 3 Disney books, including Polar Nights, but also Long Live the Pumpkin Queen and Raising the Horseman. And we're giving those away on social media, just so you know there's other spooky books out there from Disney. On Twitter, I'm giving away the 3 books I had come out in the last year, the 2 Lost Legends, The Rise of Flynn Rider and Diamond in the Rough, as well as a new book I had come out from Delacorte in August called 12 to 22, which is about a girl who makes a wish on TikTok to be the perfect age. Taylor Swift says it's 22. So she winds up in her 22-year-old self's body, where she's this big TikTok sensation. She's working for her favorite influencer, but her life is not as perfect as she thought it would be when she made the wish. And so she's trying to figure out what's going on, and is there any way to be 12 again?
That sounds like one of my mom's favorite movies, 13 Going on 30.
It's one of my favorite movies too. That's what it's inspired by.
Well, I'm sure everyone wants to know, how can they join? How can they enter the giveaway?
Oh,
yeah.
How can they enter the giveaway? They can follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. I have tagged on the spooky giveaway, I've tagged Mary Mancusi and the other 2 authors of the books, because of course we always want to promote other authors. And so I encourage you to follow them as well.
A Twisted Tale is a 13-book series co-authored by some pretty awesome writers, like Jen Calonita. And I'm always interested in learning about the process that goes into writing book series, and I guess kind of a series anthology in a sense. It's because when my favorite writers all come together for a project, that's the best feeling in the world. So will you share how you got involved in the Twisted Tale book series and share a bit about the story to our listeners?
That, when we were talking before about getting a call from Disney after writing the Fairy Tale Reform School series, the call I got was about writing Mira Mira, which is a Snow White Twisted Tale book. The series had already been established at that point. Liz Braswell wrote a number of the books in the series, and then Elizabeth Lim also came in. And the books come out twice a year, and I was the 3rd author added. And now Farah Rashan, she just came out with Almost There, which is the Tiana Twisted Tale, and that has been on the New York Times bestseller list the last 3 weeks. And the 4 of us kind of consider ourselves a sisterhood, so we just love that people love the Twisted Tale series, and we're so excited. I cannot wait to read the Tiana book. It's on my book stack in my room. So for those books, each book in the series follows a different Disney movie, and then the author puts a spin on it that twists the story. It could be a prequel, it could be a sequel, it could just take the story, in a whole new direction. And like the other books I've worked on with Disney, you come up with your scenario. We all work with this amazing editor named Brittany Rubiano, and we kind of tell Britt our vision, and Britt checks with the powers that be at Disney. Does this work? Does this feel like our characters? And then you go and write. And it's always so much fun getting to create a whole new story or a different version of the story for your favorite characters. I've done twists, and I've also, in a way, done a sequel. Go the Distance, in a way, as a sequel, because that follows Meg post events of Hercules, and what would life be like if she has to become a god in order to be with Hercules.
Well, that just gave me a thought about a possible story to write. And A Twisted Tale sounds like a very, I was gonna try and make a pun out of that, but nothing's coming to mind.
Well, that's what we hope you guys do with the Twisted Tales. I speak to a lot of schools, I do a lot of writing workshops, and twisting a tale is such a great way for you to practice your writing and have fun with your friends or on your own. And there are really no rules when you're doing a twisted tale on your own. You can take several different franchises and mash them up. You can take your favorite side character and make them the star of the story. I always give the example at a school: what if Thanos teamed up with the evil queen to find a treasure, and the only ones who could stop them were Mirabelle from Encanto, Moana, and Maui from Moana? And so you just need to have fun with it. And I think when you have fun with your writing, it really shows.
Well, that definitely sounds like a fun prompt. I'm curious to know what the students that you visited came up with, because I think that would be a #1 New York Times bestseller.
It's a fun prompt. They always tell me some of their twists, and I'm like, that's a great twist. So it's really fun to hear what they come up with.
So we know a little bit about why you switched from like writing for the magazine to writing for young readers, but also like it feels like a really big transition going from writing about actors, actresses to fairy tale books and fairy tales with a twist. So was there like a moment where you were like, whoa, I want to write these kind of novels?
Yeah, I mean, the day I interviewed The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, he was so incredibly nice. We were in New York City at Madison Square Garden, which is like this arena that hosts so many amazing events. And we were doing the interview, and people kept interrupting for his picture, for his autograph, and he couldn't have been more gracious. He is all about his fans, even today, if you do follow him on social media. And I loved that about him, but it made me wonder, how does he keep some of his life private? Like, what does he do if he wants to have dinner with his family and just wants a quiet night? If he runs out of something like toothpaste and he's at a hotel, can he run to the store and get toothpaste, or does he have to send someone? Like, I feel like you lose something when you become a celebrity, even though you gain something. And so that was the first time I ever thought to myself, well, that might make an interesting book, writing about the two sides of celebrity, keeping a private life and having a public life. And so that really inspired Secrets of My Hollywood Life, but I didn't know how to write a book. So I actually called a book publisher that was in the same building as our magazine, and I asked to take an editor out for coffee, and I just pitched her my idea. And she said, I love the idea, but you have to go write the book. And so she was great. She gave me a bunch of sample books to read, a bunch of book proposals so I could see what one was like. And I wound up writing my book idea 3 times over 9 months, 3 different ways, before she said, you know what, I really like this. Why don't you go write the first book? And then I was excited and nervous because I didn't know if I could pull it off. But you just take it one day at a time, one page at a time.
I know that you're a big Disney fan. So I really want to know, for starters, what's your favorite Disney ride? Or do you mainly go for the yummy food? And also, will you share your favorite Disney villain?
Okay, I can't pick one ride. I have so many. I love Expedition Everest at Animal Kingdom. I love Dinosaur at Animal Kingdom. We did Disneyland Paris for the first time this summer, and their Space Mountain is different from the Space Mountain in the States. It's Star Wars themed, and it's
Oh,
amazing. It is so much fun. I really, really loved it. Um, those are two of my favorite rides. I love Pirates of the Caribbean. I feel
that's a
like
good one.
we go on like 5 times when we're there. As for food, I can't leave without having a Mickey Rice Krispie treat. I don't know what it is about them, but I love them. They're better. And they also have these apples now that are like chocolate covered apples that look like different characters, and you can't eat one on your own. They're massive, but they you can cut them into like 8 slices and share with family or friends, and that's a must do. And they sell those at all the parks and at Disney Springs. They did not have them in Paris, which was disappointing, but there's always Florida.
Yeah.
And
And who's
then
your favorite villain?
my favorite villain. So I love Mother Gothel from Tangled because she's got so many different layers. You know, there's this part of me that always wonders, like, why? Like,
Yeah.
how do you keep Rapunzel hostage for 18 years and not kind of like fall for her or have affection for her, that she is your child, like you've taken care of her this long. But they have this like interesting relationship, like in the beginning of the movie, where she's kind of making fun of her and then being like, oh, stop it. And I love the song Mother Knows Best. So I
Yeah,
feel like
that's a great
she's
song.
such a great song. So she's so interesting. I have to read the Serena Valentino villains book about Mother Gothel. I feel like that would tell me a lot. And I love Hades from Hercules because, the god of the underworld
Mhm.
is like wisecracking in the story, and he's just fascinating.
Was there someone who inspired you to pursue writing? Was it kind of your imagination, your awesomeness? Like just, or was there someone else, like a parent, teacher, author, or role model?
I mean, I will say that I was a very reluctant reader in elementary school. I was not a strong reader. I would mispronounce words a lot. I was always very anxious about speaking up in class and worrying that someone would laugh if I mispronounced a word. And my teacher, Miss Lapola, noticed this, and she really encouraged me to find books that I could enjoy reading because I like them, not because they were what's popular or what everybody else was taking out of the library. And I feel like the first book I really enjoyed was Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing by Judy Blume. And I just love this story about a boy with a younger brother whose nickname was Fudge, who was always getting in trouble for
Yes.
doing really outlandish things. And once that series clicked and I started reading Super Fudge and all the other books about Peter and Fudge and Sheila the Great, uh, I found Miss Lapola was right. The more you read, the better you read. And the better you read, the better you write, because those two things really go hand in hand. So the more I read, the more I wanted to suddenly create my own stories. So I kind of have to credit her with sending me on this journey.
Now, if you could travel to one fairy tale, whether it's a Disney tale or an original story, which fairy tale would you visit and why?
I've been thinking a lot about this, about what would be fun. I'm a little bit worried about being trapped somewhere where things could get very complicated fast.
Yeah.
Um, but I would love to go to Arendelle. I feel like I would go after the big thaw, after Elsa, thawed things out a bit because it does seem a little bit chilly. But I would love to spend time in Arendelle. I would love to go on like an ice delivery with Kristoff and meet Olaf and Sven. I just love the world of Frozen so much. So I would go there.
That is a great answer. And I'm sure that I would really like to visit the Frozen world and all Disney worlds. Maybe like in the aftermath of an event, the rebuilding kind of part, not
Yeah.
and leave right when like the a war or something bad happens. Like I'm out, bye.
Agreed. Agreed. Come in when things are back on the upswing. Yes.
Yeah. And this is a question that I'm gonna ask every author I interview during the month of October. So, in honor of this being the month of ghosts, goblins, and ghouls, I thought it would be the perfect time to ask you, what is your favorite spooky middle grade read?
So I'm going to fully admit that I am bad when it comes to spooky.
Me
I
too. Me too.
I get so nervous. So I will say the fun thing about writing Polar Nights Cast into Darkness was that it is a spooky story, but it's not a scary story.
Yeah.
Even though there is this zombie, you quickly realize there's more going on here than meets the eye. And yes, the weather is stormy. And yes, this zombie is stealing people's memories. Christoph can't remember who he is, but there's more at play here. So it's kind of like part spooky, part mystery. And that I could handle. And Mary Mancusi was great because like the first scene with the Draugr, the zombie, I was like, I feel like you should introduce him because I was too nervous to do it. So I'm light spooky, but I will say one of my favorite middle grade authors who writes spooky so well that I know a lot of kids love is Lindsay Curry. She writes Scritch Scratch, What Lives in the Woods, I think is her latest one. The Peculiar Incident on Shady Street. I love her so much as a person, as an author. And so I highly recommend her if you are a spooky fan.
Well, I think there is a big difference between spooky and scary. I am not a scary fan. I will never be a scary fan. Horror, anything like that. But spooky, I like when there's a bit of spookiness, like eeriness. Is that a word? It is now.
Yes, we're going to make eeriness a word.
And I also saw that Lindsay Curry just wrote The Girl in White, which just came out. And that's on the top of my must order from an independent bookstore list. And while I'm not a huge spooky scary fan, there are definitely exceptions, especially when they're by some pretty great authors and some pretty great people. And you're a great person. Thank you so much for
you. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much for coming. Everybody here, I'm sure we're all in awe of your answers. They were amazing. Your books, if you haven't read them, everybody, you gotta read them. You can join, why do I keep saying join? You can enter Jen's 2 giveaways. At the time of recording, there are 2 giveaways going on. Just tag a friend, tag a whoever, and you can enter a giveaway for some pretty nice reads that you're going to love and devour. So, once again, thank you all for joining me, and thank you, Jen. You're the best. And everybody, keep reading, and just absolutely, positively, 100,000,000% read Jen Calonita's books. Whether you're going to read Lost Legends Diamond in the Rough, Lost Legends The Rise of Flynn Rider, the other 28 books that Jen's written at least, you're going to love them. And keep reading, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.